Hey, it's Katie with Picture Perfect Lawn Maintenance. We have spent the last few days with Matt Martin, our program consultant and a huge force in the lawn care industry as a whole. He's been visiting us in the RVA area to take a look at some of our properties, talk about our goals for 2019, and help introduce one of his new products that he's developing. I sat down with him to ask a few questions about what he thinks of our area, what he thinks of our lawns, and what he sees lawn care going into for the next 20, 30 years, just kind of what that projection is. So is this the first time you visited the Richmond area, or what'd you think of it?
Yes, the first time I visited the Richmond area. I just assumed, because I hear the name Richmond, Virginia, and I think it's going to be this huge, expansive, giant city. So when I landed in the airport and I realized it wasn't as big as I thought, I was shocked from the get-go. And then we got in and we started driving out, and I was like, wow, it's a little more rural than I anticipated. So it was actually, it was a pleasant shock, because I wasn't in the type, I was expecting to land in Chicago. I landed in Knoxville, and so it felt more like home.
That's a good thing. It's definitely a comfortable area. I know a lot of our clients appreciate that they can go from city to farms in 30 minutes, so that definitely helps. What do you think of Picture Perfect and the setup that it has and the team that it's got together so far?
Picture Perfect is really unique because it is, first off, I'm going to talk about the family aspect now, because it has such a family feel, because it is a family business. And I think what is so neat about it is, Jimmy, that started this with a vision in his mind, has adopted the shift that has occurred with the service industry really, really, really well. And I talk a lot about, and I don't mean this in a very cynical, or I'm not using the right word, but I talk a lot about how the industry as a whole, the people who forged the way for this industry are dying off. And that original business model is dying off. That everything that was done to kind of pioneer the way is basically dying. And Jimmy, though he has old school roots, is really keen on being able to make changes quickly to adjust with the shift in the industry. And so that's invaluable. And I see that in everyone from you. I see it in Brandon. I see it in Jimmy. I see it in Lisa. And that is not something that can be, it's not as easy. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? Mm-hmm. So you either have that in you or you don't. And y'all do. And so that is what is going to be the driving force for y'all to get to where you want to be with the size of your business.
Do you think that's something that entrepreneurs who are trying to get into lawn care as a whole really need to focus on from the get-go, instead of trying to adapt to that customer service base instead of just naturally taking it on?
No, you have to start somewhere. You got to establish roots, right? And the beautiful thing about the way the industry was forged is that it's a great starting point. Mm-hmm. And maybe it might be my own kind of old school philosophy, but I feel like everyone needs to cut their teeth in the old school way. Get accustomed to it. Get a feel for it. Mm-hmm. And, it's kind of like going to elementary school to be released into middle school, and then into high school, and then into the real world. I kind of feel it has that same vibe to it. So cut your teeth where it all started, and then grow from there.
Grow from there. That definitely makes sense. I know you spent a lot of time with Brandon and Jimmy looking at Picture Perfect properties that we've maintained for either just a few months or several years, as well as the soil samples that we've collected on them so far, to see what the soil quality is and what it's kind of reflecting in terms of the quality of the lawn itself. Mm-hmm. With all of those, did you see any kind of trend of something that was naturally lacking in RVA soil, and something that is definitely important for homeowners to be aware of?
Yeah, so we looked at, I can't even tell you how many soil samples we looked at, and lawns in general. And there was a very common theme among all the properties, and mainly it was the amount of calcium in the soil in relation to the amount of magnesium in the soil. Magnesium was typically extremely high. Calcium was typically extremely low. This is the first time I've seen that with such predictability. So Yes, if there was anything consistent, that was the consistency. Also, extremely low pHs, but when you're talking about coastal or even southern coastal states, that's kind of a norm. But that whole cow to mag thing was a real shocker to me.
That's interesting. Is it something that you're going to look into more in other areas that you visit, or look into further in terms of why that might be occurring in this area?
I think it's just more the natural soil composition in this area. This is my favorite thing to do when I sit down with a company is look at their soil test, because you begin to paint these generalities, and it makes it easy to build a program on top of it that way.
That's awesome. I know another thing that you noticed with a lot of the properties that we take care of were signs of grub activity, limited or pretty broad spectrum, and having some root loss as a result of that, which is already difficult to get root development in the kind of soil conditions that we were just talking about. With grub control, is that something that you recommend homeowners just go ahead and invest in preemptively, or just kind of wait and watch to see if they ever even really need it?
Normally, I would recommend people to wait and see if it becomes a trend in the area. Given the number of properties we looked at, given the number of grub issues we saw for an area like this, I would 100% recommend it preemptively, because it wasn't 20% of the properties, it wasn't 30% of the properties, it was more like 75 to 80% of the properties. And when you're talking about something that bad, at least for the next few years, that needs to be something as a top priority on everyone's mind.
I definitely agree with that. It's something that we're hoping to really reach out to our clients about this winter and see if we can get a lot more people on it, because we're expecting, with all the rain we got this year, we're expecting grubs to be even worse next year.
Yep.
In this area, in terms of the turf that most people go for and that we take care of, it's almost exclusively fescue. There's a few people who are doing zoysia or Bermuda, but for the most part, fescue is king, maybe a little bit of bluegrass blend in that. You've got experience with pretty much every type of turf that you could imagine. Further south, you've managed a lot of warm season grass. Do you have a favorite type of grass, and what would you recommend for this area at this point in the season?
Yeah, so my favorite is somewhere between Z52 Meyer and one of the new hybrid Bermuda grasses. It's definitely warm season grass is my favorite. In Knoxville, I maintain 95% fescue, so I've had a little bit of a taste of both worlds, but I definitely prefer warm season grass just because of its regenerative ability. In this area, I still see enough fescue doing really, really, really well. There's way more fescue here than there is in Knoxville. When let something go, properties that aren't maintained, they're still retaining a lot of fescue. So I think this is still a fescue market, and that's how it should be approached.
That's awesome. I know you've done a lot in the kind of agriculture turf management umbrella, from maintaining turf itself to general property maintenance, now the production side, some consulting, the YouTube channel. What inspired you to get into that umbrella in the first place?
Yeah, long story short, I failed as an engineer, and so I kind of took a step back and looked at my life as a whole, and one of the things I always enjoyed was being on a golf course. Even more than I liked playing golf, I knew I just really enjoyed being on a golf course. So that was what inspired me to take the journey down turf management. And then I learned pretty quickly that I would always be a forever student. It just kind of marks my personality, and this is the perfect industry to be forever a student. So it just made sense to not just learn the technical side of things, but then to get deeper and deeper into the technicalities and just see where it would take me in my career.
Well, I know your latest venture is Carbon Earth, and it's something that you're developing Carbon X as a product with and everything. Is that at this point for you kind of end game, or do you still have your eye on the horizon with something that's going to follow?
I do want to see Carbon Earth through the end, but I do have my eye on the horizon. And I'll give you a little example, and it's going to be, how can we incorporate Carbon Earth into more diverse situations? Of course, we want to vertically integrate and control as much as our own process and supply chain logistics as possible. So there's going to be a lot of growth that we can absorb as part of Carbon Earth. But we're also taking on agricultural ventures as it is. We're opening a relatively good-sized hemp farm in Calhoun, so we've definitely got a lot of irons in the fire.
That's good. That definitely diversifies and gives you a lot of opportunities. We talked earlier about how Picture Perfect has really embraced the family model and kind of built a legacy from Jimmy and Lisa down to Brandon. Do you think your kids are going to want to follow your legacy? Do you want them to do that?
No. No. I don't know. I don't know. You know, I'm definitely not going to push them to be a part of it. You know, my son loved having the permagreen because he could just run out there and jump on it and play with it. And so there's an allure to it because he's been around it since birth. And I think, you know, right now he says he wants to be a police officer, so I'll see that through for as long as possible. I want him to be able to kind of make up his own mind. You know, as much as I love this industry, I know how much of a dogfight this industry is. And so I want to make it very clear to him that it's not an easy way of life, but it's a very rewarding way of life.
In terms of that dogfight, where do you see the industry as a whole going in the next 20 to 30 years?
I have a little bit more of a pessimistic view in the next 20 to 30 years, but I have hope. So if we don't begin making systemic changes to the industry as a whole right now, in 20 to 30 years, it probably won't exist. If you pay attention to things that are happening like with Monsanto, or you pay attention to community social media groups, there is a lot of pushback on this industry. So we're going to have to adapt to be able to overcome the pushback we're getting. Part of that's going to be carbon-based fertility. Part of that is going to be more targeted weed control, minimizing pesticide use, more responsibility around pesticide. I think testing for applicators, testing for license holders, or even people looking to start a new business, that is going to have to become more and more and more strict to ensure the quality of work being done by applicators is also increasing.
That definitely makes sense. Do you think that the current, I guess, climate trends are going to have a negative impact on a luxury branch of agriculture?
If I could predict the weather, I'd be a very wealthy man. Yeah, climate is always going to affect what we do. And the amount of extremes, and I'm not going to talk about global warming or climate change as a general, but at least the trend over the last 3 to 5 years, in fact, I'd say even 10 years, has been extremely wild swings in one direction or the other. That is always going to make it difficult for anyone that works with nature. So that will always have an influence, but I think the people that will continue to persevere are going to be the people that are, even as they scale their business, are still able to retain the agility to make changes on the fly to overcome the weather issues they're facing.
On top of everything else that you do, you also are running a very successful YouTube channel with The Grass Factor. Is that something that you just kind of picked up for fun, or what inspired you to get into the YouTube side of things?
Psychotherapy. I started talking to the camera to alleviate anxiety and stress. You know, I had just started spraying for myself. I had no money. I had just finished this awful job, and I don't know, I started talking to the camera and it felt good, and you know, nobody for 3 years watched, and then all of a sudden you know, there's a bunch of people who watch. So it's very therapeutic, I'll say that. You
have a really good balance of followers between professionals all over the country and even the world, and then your homeowners that are trying to do the next big thing themselves. Do you see those two groups being able to kind of play back and forth and bounce ideas off of each other? Which way do you want to see your channel go in terms of that follower balance?
My preference will always be working with the professional, because I know the amount of resources that are available to professionals is almost zero to none. And if you look at it from the professional perspective, they always are working in the field, and then they have to use their off time to be able to learn. And then in their off turn to be able to learn, they don't have the amount of time it takes to dig into a subject that they need to dig into to get the answer they need to get. And so really the goal with the channel was to be able to provide that resource to applicators who don't have resources. The fact that homeowners are chiming in are great. I can't be selective over who gets educated, right? So I can't shut out the homeowner that wants to know more. I think it's great that homeowners want to know more. I think all education is going to progress the industry as a whole. But again, I want to be a voice and I want to be a resource for the professional applicator.
That definitely makes sense. I know that's a big thing that the Picture Perfect group follows as well, because there's so much good information that isn't necessarily available on other channels or other websites, other publications. So it's a really, really good perspective that you're offering to people. Do you have a favorite part of having the YouTube channel, or is there a biggest challenge?
Negative feedback is always a challenge, and anyone who owns a business or tries to be like the face of a business is usually a pretty egotistical person. So my ego gets hurt a lot, and I have to deal with that. I'd say that's the biggest challenge. But the joy is really endless, and the lawn care community as a whole, as a community, especially on the social media frontier, is so embracing and heartfelt, and the relationships are so strong that it makes any adversarial comment tolerable, I guess.
That definitely helps. There's a lot of support in the industry, which is a really awesome thing to see. For pretty much everybody, applicator or behind the scenes, winter's kind of, from the outside perspective, that downtime because the grass isn't growing and everything goes quiet, but anybody who's involved knows that it's hectic and busy behind the scenes getting ready for the next season. What are you going to be up to over the next few months getting ready for 2019?
Oh my goodness. It is, I mean, there's no downtime between now probably through November of next year. Right now we're working on so many different things internally at Carbon Earth. We've got to build, we literally started at zero, and there's only 2 of us that are handling business development and operations. We have people that are actually handling the manufacturing and engineering work in Kentucky, but when it comes to actually developing the business, it's just 2 of us. So it's a very overwhelming task at this current point. But a lot of what we're going to be doing is we want to figure out how to be able to provide more customized options for people, how to be able to shift that into a manufacturing process, how to vertically integrate our manufacturing, and then building programs, meeting with people, and giving them the type of back-end support for using this product, how to be able to market this product. So it's never ending. I do not see the light at the end of the tunnel right now.
Well, I wish you the best with all of that, and I can't wait to see where you end up going with it. This has been Matt Martin from the Grass Factor YouTube channel, from just about everything else that you can imagine. If you have any questions that you want to shoot to him, if you want to follow his channel, be sure to subscribe to it the way that you should be doing to ours. Again, it's the Grass Factor, and it's linked below in the description of this episode. Again, if you have any questions for Picture Perfect, let us know, and obviously have a Picture Perfect day. Thanks, Matt.